Welcome everyone to Econ Ed 2020. We're so happy that you can be here with us today. My name is Nikki Jones, and I am the Senior Director of Marketing and Diversity and Inclusion at Macmillan Learning. We are here today to talk to you about race and inequality in the economics classroom. Now, it goes without saying that 2020 has been the year of all years. We are experiencing an awakening when it comes to racial justice and equality, the likes of which we haven't seen for decades. Of course, there's COVID-19 and the ensuing economic fallout. But what might all of these factors mean for economics teaching and learning? To help navigate this and other questions, I'm joined by a distinguished panel who I will now turn it to introduce themselves.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Ebonya Washington. I'm a professor of economics at Yale University.
I am Gary Hoover. I am professor and department chair at the University of Oklahoma. I'm also the co-chair of the Committee on the Status of Minority Groups in the Economics Profession, along with Dr. Washington, and happy to be here.
Good afternoon. My name is Omari Swinton. I'm the chair and director of graduate studies at Howard University, and I'm also the incoming director of the AEA summer program, which will be at Howard starting summer 2021.
Thank you all for being here. I am so excited to kick this conversation off. Such an important conversation. So let's just get right into it. I want to make sure that people in the audience understand exactly what we are grappling with. And so, Ebonya, I'll start with you. Can you help us help frame the diversity issue in economics and just talk about the numbers of economics degrees that are conferred to underrepresented groups?
Absolutely. So the numbers are low. For BA, it's around 18% going to Black, Latinx, and Native American students. For PhD, of course, it's even lower. But what is even more troubling is the trend over time, the relationship between the change in economics degrees going to minorities, particularly to Black students, is pretty flat or even decreasing by some measures, whereas the share of STEM degrees and of all PhDs going to Black students is on the increase. And so our trend looks very different than the trend in other fields, and that's particularly troubling.
And from your standpoint, how did we get here? You brought in some of the statistics in STEM disciplines. Why do you think that there's such a stark difference between STEM and economics?
Well, I think recently STEM has been making more efforts than economics has been making in terms of trying to be more appealing to a broad array of students and to do their part to ensure that a broad array of students are interested and ready to go on to PhDs. So there are many things that we could be doing in economics that we are not doing to a large extent in economics. I mean, things like the summer program are wonderful and have had great gains, but we need to do a lot more.
Thank you for sharing that. Gary, I wonder if you could take us through some of the research that you've done around broadening participation in the economics profession, and then perhaps also share some of your findings. So, what did you discover when you talk to Black and Latinx and Native American folks who are studying economics?
Well, Dr. Washington said it right. And, one of the things that we find is the climate, the culture, the question. And as it relates to your conference today, one of the more stark finding is we have a pipeline problem in that people with the skill sets and the abilities to do this say, you know what, why in the world, if I have the skill set that would allow me to be an economist, why would I go to an environment that is hostile towards me and hostile towards the questions I want to answer? For instance, I want to know about how race plays a role in industrial organization, or I want to know how race plays a role in environmental economics, or I want to know how race plays a role in any one of 40 different sub areas of economics. To be told then, well, that really isn't of interest to economists. Then naturally, what most people would do is go to where they would be encouraged to do those types of studies. So if I can't talk about race and economics, fine, I'll go do race and political science. I'll go do race and any other field that is inviting. That's what we mean by a hostile environment, to where one says the types of questions that come from your lived experiences are not valid questions for this discipline to address. So I have two choices then. I can either forget about my lived experience, which diminishes me, or I move on to an area where my lived experiences are valid and people have interest in, and that's what we're seeing happening. To summarize it.
Wow, that's troubling to say the least. And we're going to come back to that, Gary, in a bit. I want to bring
just call me Hoov.
Oh, Hoov. You've corrected me a couple of times. Yes, Hoov. I got to get in the habit of Hoov. So I want to bring in Omari to get your perspective on some of the issues that Ebonya and Hoov have addressed here. From your perspective, how might increased representation, both with students and with instructors, how might that address some of the cultural issues that Hoov brought up?
Well, so, in an economics class where a professor has similar lived experiences, are there other students in the class expressing these same interests? A very good professor who sees what's going on in the class will be willing to invite these conversations about race. And when students have questions about discrimination or the market failures that they see existing in the world that really aren't introduced in principles, if there's someone who understands and see those every day, those conversations happen in the classroom. And by allowing those conversations to happen in the classroom earlier, people who might be interested in what economics has to offer won't be turned off from the subject, right? And this goes across the board, not just race, but a lot of other things that when you first introduce economics are ignored, and all the market failures, all the reasons why the government should be involved, all the types of corrections that can be done are ignored because the market is supposed to fix itself. Where a lot of people live lives where the market is inherently unfair. It doesn't fix itself. Problems that have existed exist forever. And so when you're introduced to a subject and not allowed to express those kind of concerns, it becomes something that, well, I'm just taking this class, I'll get my C or B or whatever, and I'll never take another economics class. And, as an economics professor, that's something I hear the most from people who meet me, and I tell them I teach economics. They're like, that's the class I hated the most in school, right? And, as a field, we should really want to make our economics introduction that people have something that even if they don't want to be economists, they appreciate what economists have to say. And a lot of that comes from people's experiences in the classroom and the openness of their fellow classmates to hear what they say, and for the faculty who teach them to express and allow these types of ideas to be talked about within the context of the class.
So I learned a new concept the other day. It's called belonging uncertainty. And I don't know if you all are familiar, but essentially what it means is um, we have fears about not belonging within certain groups. And those fears can jam up our processing power, thus making it very difficult to perform, whether we're talking in an academic setting or a work setting or any setting. And it seems applicable to what you're saying here, Omari, in terms of the environment not being welcoming and students perhaps saying, okay, well, I'm going to take my C, or I'm just going to do what I need to do to get by and get out. And it makes me wonder what ideas we've missed by not being more inclusive and inviting in the field. So I have a question for all of you, because you are obviously all doing very well professionally within the discipline. I'm curious how you persisted given some of the challenges that we've discussed, and what you were able to tap into to sort of chart your own path when it comes to research and professional mobility.
Well, I think to some extent we all suffer, or to a great extent, the belonging that you talked about can be manifested in something else, called imposter syndrome, where you're doing this work and you're not quite sure that you fit in. The thing that keeps me going in economics is I see it more as a tool, right? And so it is not the thing that I actually care about. What I care about is what economics allows me to do with it. For instance, I have questions about labor markets, and I have questions about financial markets, and I have questions that intersect with those things and political outcomes that all revolve around using modeling. And I go to economics to try and find answers to them. To the extent that economics provides me with a toolkit that I can then use to answer these questions, it's useful. But what has increasingly become apparent is that for a lot of us, economics doesn't provide us the tools to answer the questions that we want to answer. And then we become irrelevant. Going back to what Omari said, once we cannot say economics has a toolkit to where we can use economics to address these issues, then we've only put ourselves out of business. And so, to answer your second question, which was about how I persisted in that I've looked for ways and opportunities that economics can help me answer the questions that are relevant to me. And to the extent that it's not, then I'm willing to put it aside. The problem nowadays is the inflow of people willing to put it aside is much greater than the number of people who are staying in or persisting in the profession. But that's my over talking it.
Brilliant, brilliant. Ebonya or Omari, would you like to share about your personal journey and mentors or support systems that you relied on to sort of persist?
Yes, I'll say briefly that my experience is similar to Hoov's in being about the questions and not coming to economics for some pure love of economics. In fact, I wanted to get a PhD in public policy and was told by an undergraduate professor that that wouldn't be a good idea and that I should choose a discipline in order to answer the questions that I wanted to answer. And I simply chose economics. So I was also able to, through graduate school, stay focused on questions that I wanted to answer, even if I didn't see other folks answering them. And I imagine this is true for many minority students, my dissertation work looks nothing like the work of either of my advisors. And so, you stay focused on what you are trying to answer. But the mentoring you raised, that is super duper important as far as what helped me to get through. The Committee on the Status of Minority Groups and Economics Profession oversees the summer program, but also a mentoring program for graduate students, pairing graduate students with PhDs in economics, generally minority PhDs. And that program was super valuable for me, particularly the meetings that we had once a year where mentees and mentors came together. And that way, there are other folks out there who are going through the same thing as you, and you can, reach out to them when it's needed. So yes, mentoring, very important.
So I would say my journey in economics is probably different because my dad was a PhD economist, and I actually grew up around economists. My dad was a member of the National Economics Association. He used to take me as a child through all of the annual meetings, and so a lot of the people who are my colleagues now, they've known me since I was a little kid, which I've always felt a sense of community around economics. My college professors at Florida A&M supported me and told me that I should go on and get a PhD. I was fortunate enough to actually go to the AEA summer program where Hoov was one of the professors in the program and Ebonya was my research assistant. And those cohorts of people I met during the summer program are still people that I talk to and collaborate with research now. And so I've always been fortunate that even though when I was in graduate school, I was the only minority in my program for a while, I've always had these outside influences in my life who have been successful in economics, who I could look to as sort of what I need to do in the field to be successful. And the mentorship and having those people who are willing to support you, regardless of the kind of research you do, is important. I'm lucky that I'm at Howard University, and my university values the type of research I do on race. And so I don't run into those issues of my research not being appreciated by my institution. But I understand that other people don't have those same experiences in the field that I've had, where I've always been in an environment where I've been supported and had people who supported me through my journey.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. That's so cool that you were going to economics meetings as a kid, and sort of it's coming full circle, right? You're collaborating with some of the folks that you met at those meetings. So I want to dig a little deeper, right, on how we sort of have come to this place of having a pipeline problem, as Hoov pointed out earlier in his remarks. And I want to get into some of the underlying reasons why there's a diversity issue in economics. And we've alluded to a few of those, right? To hostile culture. We've talked about mentorship very briefly. Ebonya brought that up. And so I wonder, what are some of the things that we can do as a community to change course and make the field more inviting, more inclusive, more representative?
So if I could start with this one, I think one of the things that the field could do is actually from day one, let people know that there's not this stringent set of rules you have to follow to be an economist. Economics as a degree, if you just get a bachelor's degree, is probably one of the most useful majors in America. And people shy away from it because a lot of students are told, oh, if you go in economics, you have to do a lot of math, or you have to be ready to do all this rigorous work. And, it is true to an extent, but it's like every other field in college, right? Like there are some things that are difficult about it, but the difficulty involved in this field actually gives people who get economics degrees a wide variety of choices once they leave school. And oftentimes when students know the different types of things they can do with an economics degree, they're more interested in going into those fields. And so this encouragement of following economics because you want to do things from as far as help predict outcomes in sporting events, or see what's going on in the stock market, or find a better way to develop health policies to help minority groups, or find ways to solve problems in the environment. All of these use economics you could use economics as your toolkit which will make it more useful. And the more people are exposed to different opportunities that can come out from pursuing economics, I think more people will be interested in pursuing economics as a field. And I don't think as a profession we do a great job of knowing what an economist is, because most students, when they come to your principles classes, they think going into economics is just about the stock market and going into business, right? And they don't realize that almost every company has an economist on staff, because economists can answer a wide variety of questions, and they could use a wide variety of tools to get to those answers. And so as a profession, we do a better job of letting people know what economists do. And it's not just this small box, it's this wide variety that you can do. We'd be better off as a profession.
I love that. I love that. One of my favorite sports commentators, I'm a big sports fan, is Omari Jones. And I don't know if you all are familiar with Bo, but he spent a significant portion of his education, focused on economics. And of course, he decided to take a different path and wound up writing and getting into sports talk radio and television. But I think he said in the past that his economics training gave him the tools to just think differently about life and just navigating some of the discussions that we find ourselves in. So thank you for sharing that, Omari. Hoov, Ebonya, is there anything else you'd like to add on there around this pipeline issue? Are there things that we can do to address the culture, the lack of mentorship, bias when it comes to research?
Sure. Well, let me jump in here. Look, the thing that's interesting about principles economics, especially at some of these larger state universities like where I am now, only about 3 or 4% of the many students in my principles class are ever going to major in economics. However, almost every freshman here must take principles of micro and principles of macro. So economists have the unique opportunity to touch almost every incoming freshman here at the university setting through our principles. And given that for most students, this is probably going to be the only economics that they're ever going to have. Because remember, not many of those students are going on to major. And then if you don't major, then it's highly unlikely that you're going to pursue any graduate work in it. We do an absolutely poor job of then saying, here, going back to what Omari said, here is the broadness of what you are being exposed to. Here is the inclusiveness of what you are being exposed to. Here are the benefits. So that when we come in on day one and we tell all of our freshman students, we're going to start from the assumption that there is only the rational man. We don't say woman either. We just say the rational man. And then this rational agent only does things that are going to be utility maximizing. So given that that's the case, there is no room in economics for discrimination. Why? Because that's not utility maximizing. We've just lost almost all of our underrepresented minority students because they know that this exists, right? Then we go on and say, if we look at labor markets are going to say that the wage is equal to your marginal product of labor. Therefore, there's no room here for discrimination based on gender. We've lost that other half of the class. You keep making these boneheaded mistakes, and before you know it, we've whittled this profession down to where we have no one left. And that's the situation we have now. So given that we had this unique opportunity to get in contact with all of these incoming students, if we could do a better job of showing just how broad and wide this profession is, we could overcome that pipeline by then having more than 3 to 5% of people saying, hey, this is something I'm interested in. And even for that 95% that doesn't, they walk away with a better inclination and a better idea of what economics has to offer and what it is.
So selling it, right? Putting on your marketing hat and selling the possibilities.
You don't even have to sell it. It just show what it is, right? Show what it is instead of showing what it is not. When you tell somebody this is not the place to come to talk about discrimination, you've lost them. As opposed to just saying this is a place that has room for rigorous discussions and rigorous analysis of discrimination, you're winning. And you don't have to sell it or make it up. It's already there. Just use it.
Well, I want to thank you all, Omari, Hoov, and Ebonya, for being here with us for this really important conversation. We're going to pick this up with a live Q&A. We're going to also continue the discussion on our community. Thank you again for joining us.